I think it's also important to remember Tony Blair's track record in digging up weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and the catastrophe that has befallen Iraq ever since he joined the invasion of the country.
We're very glad to be with you this morning, especially because we get to talk about Sir Tony Blair, who's going to join President Trump's Board of Peace that will be responsible for overseeing security and reconstruction for Gaza. The former Prime Minister will join, among others, Donald Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and the Middle East envoy, Steve Witkoff, on this board. There has seemingly been no invitation for our current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. Let's discuss more with Mehran Kamrava, who's Professor of Government at Georgetown University's campus in Qatar. Good morning from us.
Good morning from Doha.
It's very good to speak to you this morning. Can you untangle for us whether this board and the personnel on the board are kind of fit for purpose? Are they going to achieve peace and reconstruction in Gaza?
This has been a region that has seen no peace for more than a century, and it is hard to believe that a board, any board, particularly this kind of a board, is going to be any different. We don't really have any reason to believe that people like Jared Kushner, Steve Witkoff, Tony Blair, or the president of the World Bank really have intimate familiarity with conditions on the ground, can put pressure on the parties involved, really can affect construction. They might be very good for running a corporation, for example, a corporate board. But in terms of affecting peace on the ground and changing conditions on the ground, I'm afraid the prognosis isn't that positive.
The principle of this thing is almost to run Gaza like a business, like a company, by the nature of these boards. And people like Tony Blair, for example, who has run a country, but who has also actually agreed peace in this context on the island of Ireland with the signing of the Good Friday Agreement early on in his time as Prime Minister. Some of these people, including Blair, have a track record that may be useful.
They do, but I think it's also important to remember Tony Blair's track record in digging up weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and the catastrophe that has befallen Iraq ever since he joined the invasion of the country. So yes, of course, some of these guys are eminently qualified for bringing about peace, but they also have less than stellar records in terms of stability, particularly in a place like the Middle East.
Yeah. What are the challenges then going forward from here? They're going to be enormous. Loads of Gaza has been destroyed over the course of the last few years of fighting there. The board still seems to be a work in progress as well. Additional members of the committee will be announced over the coming weeks, is what the White House has had to say. One of my thoughts here is how this board will enforce any decisions that it makes. Will it have a security force? Will it be negotiating with Hamas terrorists? These are unanswered questions as far as I can make out.
Yes, I don't want to be completely pessimistic.
Yeah.
Any effort, and constituting a board with this kind of luminaries in it is, of course, a positive step. But ultimately, the Palestinians and Israelis have to learn to live with one another. What is important, finally, ultimately, is conditions on the ground. When a Palestinian wakes up in the morning and goes about his or her life in an ordinary, dignified fashion, or when an Israeli wakes up and goes to work without fear of attacks from Palestinians. And I think what we need really is to ensure that grassroots activities, conditions on the ground, living conditions, the way people actually feel, those are also impacted by our efforts, by efforts of the United States, Israel, Britain, the Persian Gulf states, and everyone else involved, rather than constituting these grand boards with very prestigious names on them, but very little traction on the ground.
Yeah. I wanted to put to you as well something that one of our correspondents mentioned earlier, which is the sort of role for, among others, Qatar in this particular situation, just given where you're speaking to us from this morning. That Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, had vowed that they, among others, would have nothing to do with the running of Gaza. Yet there does seem to be some role for Qatar here. What's your analysis of that?
Qatar has played an important and strategically very clever role in maintaining open lines of communication with everyone, with the Americans, with Taliban, with Muslim Brotherhood, with Hamas. And this has enabled it to be able to put pressure on some of these actors, particularly groups like Hamas. Qatar is one of the only Arab countries that really has any sort of leverage on Hamas. It's one of the only Arab countries that prior to October of 2023 was paying salaries of government workers in Gaza. And so I think Qatar really can play an important, critical role, particularly in terms of conditions on the ground.
May I ask one question as well, just about the situation in Iran to you, just while we're speaking to you, and appreciative of your analysis, Professor. The son of Iran's deposed Shah, Reza Pahlavi, has set out his vision for what the country would look like under his leadership. Let's have a listen.
In security and foreign policy, Iran's nuclear military program will end. Support for terrorist groups will cease immediately. A free Iran will work with regional and global partners to confront terrorism in diplomacy. Relations with the United States will be normalized, and our friendship with America and her people will be restored. The State of Israel will be recognized immediately.
Is that a viable way forward for Iran, Professor Kamrava?
Well, that's a beautiful vision, and it is a terrific vision of kind of regional peace and stability. But does Reza Pahlavi really have the social base and the popular support inside Iran to realize his vision for the country? By the way, this is a vision that has only just now been articulated, not over the last 46 years when he has been in exile. And so I think it's one thing to kind of, again, come up with grand declarations and these grand visions of peace and stability, but it's quite another to have meaningful support among average Iranians. And of course, unfortunately, many people in the diaspora, in the Iranian diaspora, who have rallied around Reza Pahlavi as a symbol of opposition against the Islamic Republic, aren't really there inside the country to experience the daily brutality of the Islamic Republic.
It's very good to speak to you, Professor Mehran Kamrava. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.